The Bible says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. And that's what I had to do. I had to say no to all the noise, to be quiet so that I could find the signal, so that I could hear God speak to me. Because that's where direction comes from. The reason why many people are so confused in life and don't even know what they're going to do, and they fall into distractions, is simply because they don't hear the voice of God. They're not connected to their true self. The moment true personal transformation happened for me, when I was 14 and I was at a crossroad determining what I was going to do with my life going forward. A big part of being successful in that personal transformation was learning to let go, or the concept of learning to die to the self, learning to die while you're alive. And it can be a difficult concept to understand if you haven't done the work personally in understanding what that means, but also if you haven't sought that understanding through books, through knowledge of other people who've gone through the experience and have spoken about it, like spiritual teachers, etc. And I don't think I personally understood it while I was going through that process, but it was an understanding that came after having gone through that experience. And I became this completely different human being, but more so a completely renewed spiritual being. It's a concept the Bible talks about, of being born again, going through Christ and learning to be born again, learning to come out with this new sense of renewal and this higher consciousness, higher awareness. But I only understood what it meant to die to the self, or to die while you are alive, only after I went through it. And that's because when I look back on the journey that I took, and all the little decisions, which were in fact very big decisions that I made, that I did not realize at the time I was making those decisions, they were all about learning to let go of the identity that was the me that had gotten up to that point prior to that transformation. So this lost, immature, confused, broken, victim mentality type of individual. And I have to say this because I find this quite interesting. When I mentioned that I went through this great spiritual awakening and personal transformation at the age of 14, I often forget how young 14 is. And when I look at kids nowadays who are 14, it hits me in the face, or this realization hits me that they're just kids. This 13, 14, 15-year-olds, they're kids. But I never saw myself as a kid, at that time, going through this personal transformation, going through this period of transformation. And I'm getting goosebumps while I'm talking about this, because I can't really put into words the level of maturity you would have to have at that age, or the level of consciousness you would have to raise yourself to. And maybe it's because I was just born that way, or I was lucky to be born into a family, particularly into a home with a father who was consciously aware and who opened my mind to a lot of these things early on, and who tried many different things to help to expand my mind and my consciousness when I was still a kid. But I also think that I was shaped by my experiences, and I was one of those lucky ones that chose not to repeat or become just like the people that caused those bad experiences that I went through. Because I believe it's been my experience, and out of that experience, my belief that we always have a choice with everything that we're presented with, everything that life, the cards that life deals us, the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And those two choices are not anyone else's to make but ours. We can either choose to be just like the people that hurt us and that did bad things to us, or we can choose to be the people that don't repeat those types of mistakes. And I don't know why I chose the latter option, why I chose not to become just like the people around me. But I think the biggest thing that contributed to making that decision, the decision to being different, was because I didn't want the kind of life they had. I'd gone through the pain, I'd gone through the suffering, I'd gone through the neglect and abandonment. And I remember when I went through those experiences as a kid, I told myself that I would never, ever allow my children, if I ever have children, to go through what I've gone through. And secondly, that I will work hard to have a life that is free of any of this stuff. And I think that was the foundation necessary that enabled me to make different decisions throughout my life and to be very careful when it came to very important decisions that will alter and determine the trajectory that your life takes long term. But I believe that ultimately our life is a series of choices we make. When we make one choice, a new branch of reality opens, new types of possibilities open up to us. When we also don't act, and when we choose not to make a decision on certain things, when we're undecisive, we're also opening up other branches of possibilities that could occur. But it's a better reality, it's a better life to have when you're in the driver's seat and when you're being conscious about your choices, conscious about where you're going in your life and the decisions you're making and the outcomes that those decisions are yielding. But all of that stuff is background that I wanted to touch on. But the subject or focus of today's talk is on what you have to do in order to have a transformation, to be a new type of person, to pursue the things you want to pursue. You know, one of the great consciousness awakeners or spiritual teachers that I used to follow who passed away last July, Bob Proctor. If you've watched the Secret documentary, you'll know that Bob was very much a big part of it. And it was also the first time I came across Bob Proctor. But Bob explained that when it comes to goal setting and when we want to achieve things in life, the things we want exist in different levels of frequency. So you can imagine different lines representing different frequencies where all of our desires and our goals exist. Now you also exist along a specific frequency. And that existence along that frequency allows the kinds of things that you're experiencing because they're all within that same frequency. So if you're here down at the bottom and you want to achieve a goal, you have a desire to become something, someone, to achieve something that's up here, it's usually a higher level than where you are. I mean, that's the whole idea of aiming for something big, aiming for something new and trying something new. But Bob explains that when you're down here at this specific frequency and you want to achieve something up here, there's a period of transition you have to go through in order to get from here to here. And I want to explain that concept about how do you make it through this space here? How do you go from this frequency to the next frequency so that you can experience the things that are at level with this frequency? You see, the only reason I'm able to do the things I do now is because I had to let the old self die, this old identity of who I was at 13, 14, 15. And I had to go through a process of renewal where I raised my frequency. I went through the process over a 9-month period over the course of a year where I took a gap year after completing my grade 9. I focused on going through, basically making it through this space that was between where I was and where I wanted to be. So I want to explain that concept to you. And a critical part of it is to learn to let go. That you have to learn to leave this frequency here. That you have to be willing to forego all the attachments, to detach from everything that holds you down in this frequency. You know, it's like an anchor of a ship. This identity you have now at this level is what is the anchor that's keeping you anchored to this life, to all the experiences that you're experiencing. And now the only way that the ship is going to sail and leave the harbor or leave the place where it's anchored from is if you lift the anchor up. And it's the same concept with your life as well. The only way for you to go through this transition to get to this higher frequency, moving away from this current lower frequency that you're at, is for you to let go, is for you to surrender, the concept of surrendering, and being willing to die to the old self so the new self can be reborn. To put this into context, when I had to die to the old self, when I had to let go, I had to let go of all of my relationships. And by relationships, I meant all of my friends, all of my connections, even family. And Interestingly enough, it wasn't difficult because prior to making that decision of letting go, I'd gone through a very, very thorough process of two things. And I've talked about this before in one or two of the videos on the channel, that there were two critical things that I did in the beginning before this process of dying to the self and transformation had to happen. The first one was that I I had to determine where I wanted to go. I had to determine what this new frequency would be like. Like, what am I working towards? What am I aiming for? And the Bible says you have to have a vision. Without a vision, you will perish. So I had to determine what was my vision. What am I working towards? What do I desire? What do I want for myself? I had to get very clear on that. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people in life, is that they don't know what they want and they don't know where they're going. So that was the first decision I had to make, or the first thing I had to figure out. The second thing I had to do was I had a series of contemplations where I looked at my life and all the distractions that were in my life, or at least distractions that people my age would be exposed to. And I thought deeply about why those distractions were distractions, and what would be the outcome of those decisions if I stuck to them, if I invested in them, if I allowed them to be a part of my life. What would be the outcome of those decisions? And interestingly, I found that they didn't yield the kind of results I wanted. They weren't aligned with this vision that I had. That if I had these distractions, I wouldn't be able to get to this higher frequency that I wanted to be. And that's why the vision setting part is important, because it sets your target, your aim, your objective, what you're working towards, your North Star. Without it, you don't know where to adjust the sail. So once I understood that those distractions weren't going to yield the results that would get me to this higher frequency, to where I wanted to be, it was very easy to let go of them, because I knew that they weren't the things that would allow me to get to where I wanted to be. So after setting my target or my vision and having a clear sense of what the distractions were and making a deliberate decision to stay away from them, I was now ready to go through this process of personal transformation, this process of dying to the self. And that started off with letting go of all my connections and my relationships. Basically, my network was out the window. I stopped texting my friends. I stopped talking to family. I just stopped any outside interaction with anyone, because I knew that I don't have anything to show for. I know at that time, at that age, I was a lost, confused kid. I had potential, but it was potential that was not focused. It was raw potential that was just wild. It was wild energy, and I had to tame that. I had to bring it into focus. It's just like you can't start a fire if you don't focus the rays of sun. It's the same thing. You can't achieve massive things if you don't learn to focus your potential, your attention, your energy onto one thing you want to be very good at. So I had potential, but I was just lost and confused. I didn't have a North Star I was working towards. I didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't create the space for me to mature and grow and awaken as a spiritual being, having a human experience. So I had to learn to first have a connection with myself and with God, higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it. The first connection I had to strengthen was that with myself and with God. After that, I could, then expand and establish newer relationships with people that were on par with where I wanted to go in life, where I wanted to be. But that was the first thing I needed to do, because I was lost. And the Bible says, be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I am. And that's what I had to do. I had to say no to all the noise, to be quiet so that I could find the signal, so that I could hear God speak to me. Because that's where direction comes from. The reason why many people are so confused in life and don't even know what they're going to do, and they fall into distractions, is simply because they don't hear the voice of God. They're not connected to their true self, to their divine source, to the divine intelligence, the creator of all there is in the universe. And when you don't have that connection, you don't have an anchor in life. You don't have this energy that guides you, that steers you away from the distractions and attachments of this world and nudges you in the right direction towards things that grow and strengthen you, things that empower and enlighten you, that awaken your consciousness, things that enable you to have an impact in this world, however small it may be. So I had to learn to first deepen my relationship with who I was as a spiritual being having a human experience, and therefore my connection, my relationship to God, the source. So I said no to all my connections and my network externally. Once I let go of the relationship, suddenly there was no expectations, there was no need to impress people, no need to keep up with the Joneses, no need to keep up communication. I just let the people that I knew be, and I allowed myself to be who I wanted to be, who I needed to be. And after that happened, amazingly, I created this space that felt infinite, where I could now focus on really understanding, who am I? Who is this 14-year-old confused, odd teenager who's taking a gap year off called Crystal? I want to learn more about her. I want to find out who she really is. Has her experiences and this difficult place that she's found herself in, is that who she is? Or is there more to her? Is there a nature to her that I'm yet to understand because I haven't taken the time to study her? And I find it funny, now that I've mentioned that we love to learn about other people. We read their books, and we pursue their teachings, and we watch their interviews and their presentations, and we like to listen to their opinions about the world and their perception, their outlook of the world. But we rarely think about studying ourselves. And it's not about being a narcissist or being an egotistical person that, oh, I'm so important. But when I mean studying yourself, I mean understanding who is looking through those eyes. Who is the ghost in the shell? Who is the spirit making the decisions and giving life to this identity, this human physical identity, temporary identity, albeit, that you have in this very temporary life and temporary world? I don't think enough people do that. And that's why we seek direction from other people. We seek direction from this external world, from this physical world with its distractions. And we forget that direction is within you. So when we talk about dying to the self, you have to be willing to let go of the attachments that you have in this life. And if you can do that, you create the space, the energy, the time, and the opportunity to be reborn. And you do that by starting to learn to understand yourself first. That's critical. Once you have a deep understanding of who you are in God, you are on the path to self-renewal now. And I hope that some of you are going through this journey, and I'm here to support you in whatever way I can. But amazing things happen when you let go and you learn to walk freely, crossing the river of change to this higher frequency that you want to be in. I wish you all a very good day. Sending you lots of love. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye. Love you, 'cause I want to.